What's up, everybody? Back on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, not Facebook page, YouTube page, and I'm rocking the new digs, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast T-shirt, which is available on Teespring.com. There's T-shirts, there's long sleeve T-shirts, there's hoodies, there's all sorts of stuff on there for everybody to kind of pick through and pick whatever they want to buy. I really appreciate everybody that's reached out to me and purchased items on teespring.com and said thank you for putting the items out there and everything like that. I really appreciate that. I'm repping Buffalo with this T-shirt, and obviously right here we got Thomas Take Sports Podcast, established in 2016, hosted by yours truly. My name is on the back. All avenues that you can tune in to check out the show to get started. Twitter, people follow me on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Twitter page, which is at Thomas Takeover, the Twitter handle. You can follow me on Facebook at the Thomas Takeover, as well as just typing in the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on the search bar on Facebook. The page will come up. You will be able to like the page, get access to certain statuses that I post on Facebook and things of that nature. So why don't I hop on here and talk about UFC 223, which took place last night, Saturday, on pay-per-view, live from the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. It was a crazy event, in terms of all the lead up that led up to, the week that was UFC 223. I found it, completely shocking and fascinating, just the amount of changes that the card had. I'd never seen anything like that up until that point, and the fact that it made all the headlines that it did for better or for worse. I'll get to that a little bit later, but realistically, I want to talk about the fights, and I feel like I've talked about the lead up to UFC 223, the McGregor bus attack, and all those things ad nauseum, and I really don't want to talk about those things anymore other than the fights. I want to talk about, the fights per usual. I'm a big combat sports fan, and through all the ups and downs that the UFC 223 card, went under, I feel like it would be a huge disservice to the fighters and to the fans that the UFC had very little refunds in terms of the fans that asked for their money back. The UFC did a fairly good business last night. So all things considered, I thought they did very well. Want to go through, obviously, the main event, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Iaquinta, a fight that I thought was an interesting fight, a fight that was put together, obviously, on short notice, on a day's notice. And Iaquinta, I thought, was a true gangster in there to take the words out of Khabib Nurmagomedov's mouth. To start off with his performance, Al got to his feet probably 4 or 5 separate times in the bout. 4 or 5 separate times he got to his feet, was unable to inflict much damage against Khabib. But I thought for everything that, was leading up to the event, the fact that Al went 25 full minutes with Khabib Nurmagomedov, who is widely believed to be one of the best pound-for-pound fighters on planet Earth, I thought he did a fantastic job in the fight, and I thought that it couldn't have gone much better for him than going, quote unquote, going the distance in a true Rocky story. So I got some stupid pop-ups coming on here, so sorry about that. But to say the least, I think that this event was one that was a solid event, given everything that happened. Al fought his heart out. He did the best he could against who I believe is one of the best top 3 pound for pound fighters in the sport right now, in Khabib Nurmagomedov, who moves to 26-0. Want to talk about some of the things Khabib did very well. Dominated the fight. I mean, he did dominate the fight. He won on 2 judges' scorecards, 50-43. Up until that fight, I never heard Bruce Buffer announced a fight by saying 50-43, 50-43, and Khabib Nurmagomedov definitely won the fight in dominant, devastating fashion. Outside of finishing Iaquinta, it was a fully, a truly dominating performance from Khabib, and Khabib did everything in his power to win the fight and to dominate the fight from bell to bell. So dominated, mixing takedowns and punches in the second and third rounds. I really thought he used his jab effectively, almost exclusively within the bout. When they were not on the feet, I thought he did a fantastic job at, you know, initiating the takedown. And when Iaquinta got back up and they were on the feet, I thought Khabib Nurmagomedov's stand-up was very impressive, to be quite honest. And most MMA fans will say, "Wow, you think that his stand-up was impressive?" I thought there were some holes there in comparison to his previous fights. Khabib's stand-up was actually improved. If you followed Khabib for as long as I have, his performance versus Edson Barboza was a true ground and pound control fight, where his performance versus guys like Michael Johnson, where he got hit pretty hard in that fight and was rocked in that fight. He was never in any danger in this fight. And if you compare the Michael Johnson fight, where there was stand-up mixed in there, compared to this fight where there was a lot of stand-up in the middle round, second, third, fourth round, fifth round a little bit too, I thought Khabib has improved in terms of his stand-up. There was moments where he was shaking his hand, going like this, and then firing the jab. He was moving side to side, throwing rights and lefts, 1-2 combinations he was throwing. I thought he looked pretty good out there. Granted, not as good as a Conor McGregor in terms of the stand-up, but much, much, much improved in terms of his ability on the feet. So I really, really liked that. At points in the fight where he didn't want to necessarily telegraph a shot, he was able to stay and maintain the fight, maintain winning the fight on the feet, which I put out a poll today, which I'm going to pull up the news of the poll now on my phone here. On my personal Facebook page, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page, I've been putting polls up on Facebook for people to vote in and say, hey, I want these people, everyone that tunes in, I want everyone to discuss and talk and debate these sports topics. And putting polls out there, I think, is the best way to get people to interact and discuss and debate. So this poll that I put out was one that, as of earlier today, I know it was leaning one way, but I want to check it and I want to know where it is. Okay, so created a poll 6 hours ago, and the question in the poll was if Khabib versus Conor McGregor if Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Conor McGregor was announced tomorrow for the UFC lightweight title sometime in September, who would be your pick to win? Over 190 votes were tallied, which is not a high amount. I've ran polls with higher amounts of votes than that, but it's a pretty good amount of votes to where you can get a consensus as to where people are leaning for this fight. And where people are leaning, they're leaning towards Khabib in this fight. Khabib 58%, McGregor 42%. So 191. So someone just hopped on there and voted for Khabib. So that's another vote for Khabib. There's 17 hours left in this poll. Obviously, it's a 24-hour poll. But 58% believe that Khabib Nurmagomedov, post his victory versus Iaquinta, would beat Conor McGregor in a title fight. So I find that to be very interesting, and that brings up my next talking point. In this whole situation. I want to, talk more about Iaquinta for just a second, though. I feel like he deserves some praise for this fight, even though he lost, and it was a dominant, devastating loss probably to him, on short notice, on 24 hours notice. Much respect to Al for taking this fight. He went the full 25 minutes, proved that, he provided the fans with a rocky moment, proved his toughness. And should be respected by UFC fighters all around the company and MMA fans all around the world. So let's move on from that. The Khabib Iaquinta fight went largely the way that we thought it would, with Khabib winning via unanimous decision. let's move on from that and talk about the state of the UFC lightweight division. So obviously, Khabib Nurmagomedov is now the new reigning, defending, undisputed UFC lightweight champion, and I say undisputed very lightly due to the fact that this fight was for a title, but there was some areas of uh, of conflict with this fight. But Conor McGregor, one thing we do know is that Conor McGregor did not defend his title for not 1 year, but for 2 years. And anytime you have a champion with inactivity that amounts to a year-long inactivity, continuous inactivity, usually the belt is stripped from him, let alone 2 years. So I'm very thankful that Khabib Nurmagomedov is the new reigning UFC lightweight champion, because I know for a fact that this guy will defend the title and he'll do what's right by the UFC and provide great moments for the company and for the sport, because that's what I want as a mixed martial arts fan. I don't care about money, how much money Conor McGregor makes. That doesn't really affect my fanhood or my life, really, in terms of entertainment. I want to see guys defend the title. I want to see guys beat contender after contender, because that is what provides the sport with room to grow. When these guys win the title and they do not defend it, it makes the sport look so much worse. It diminishes the value of the titles. And really, what's the point? If these fighters are fighting for the title and they won't defend the belt, it really, really diminishes the value of the titles. So with Khabib as the champ, the UFC lightweight division, in my words, gets a kick in the ass that it really desperately needed. McGregor, in my opinion, was terrible for the UFC lightweight division, with this logjam of fights that have taken place with the interim titles, and just a mess. So, in terms of dollars and cents in 2016, 2015, 2014, he was pretty damn good for the UFC. But what has he done for them lately? Zilch, not a nothing, by not fighting for 2 years and fighting Floyd Mayweather in a crossover fight. That would lead to a lot of different it would open up a can of worms, and that's what it did. So Khabib will defend the belt, in my opinion, in 4 to 5 months. Whether it's against Conor or not is another story. Conor didn't defend the title in 2 years. That's for all the Conor fanboys and fangirls out there, which I know they're out there. That leads to what is next for Khabib. What fight is next for Khabib Nurmagomedov? And I want to talk about the four possibilities actually, that I think are possible for Khabib. Number one, obviously, is Khabib versus Conor McGregor. That's the poll that I put out. 58% of my listeners and viewers believe that Khabib would win that fight. And I did share this poll on an Irish page, and it still didn't matter. So Russia, or just MMA fandom, to say the least, really truly believes that Khabib Nurmagomedov would win that fight. And really, Conor McGregor has silence critics in terms of how he can fight against a wrestler. When he fought Chad Mendes, he was able to get back to his feet. Chad Mendes took Conor down at will in a round worth of fighting, at will. And that was on short notice. That was at 145. Chad Mendes much smaller than Khabib Nurmagomedov. So it's going to be very interesting to see if this fight does come to fruition, which I think is a big if, to be quite honest with you, a bigger if than what people think. That will lead to an interesting set of circumstances for Conor. If he takes this fight and he has to go up against Khabib, he's never fought anybody like Khabib, and Khabib has never fought anybody like him. So let the debate begin in that realm of everything. Let the debate begin. Who do you think would win this fight? 58% of my listeners and viewers think that Khabib would win this fight. Another fight that Khabib Nurmagomedov mentioned that I would definitely approve would be Khabib versus George St. Pierre, and I say that with pure excitement due to the fact that Khabib is undefeated, 26-0. George St. Pierre lost 2 fights in his career, one to Matt Serra, the other to Matt Hughes. And he was able to get rematches with those opponents and defeat them, demoralize them worse than the uh, first fights were. Much, much. I mean, it was like polar opposites of, and he actually beat Matt Hughes twice out of 3 times. Matt Serra, they never did a trilogy, but I'm sure he would have beat him the third time. No offense, Matt Serra, but George St. Pierre is largely believed to be, the best ever. I believe him to be the best ever. I'm going to hide the sun there. I believe him to be the best ever. Former welterweight champ, former middleweight champ, defended the title numerous times. Was a champ for 7 years, and definitely was a model athlete for the sport. Easily one of the greatest athletes, if not the greatest athlete to ever compete inside the UFC octagon. So the prospects of Khabib versus GSP, I think, is a very good fight. It's a very interesting matchup because both of these guys are so grappling centered. True mixed martial artists. They're not just great wrestlers, but they have punching ability. And Khabib showed that. Had a very GSP like performance last night. The more that I think about it, able to initiate the takedown, but when not able to initiate the takedown, stick and move, jab, cross, 1-2, all night long, and that's really so I got an itchy eye here. That's really what Khabib did. He put on a GSP like performance, and I would like to see that. I would like to see Khabib versus GSP. I'm down, but what does that mean? Does that mean that the fight would be for the 155-pound title? Does that mean that the fight would be a catchweight at 170? GSP could get down to 155 and then balloon up to 175 or 180, in the midst of the fight week. You have a huge advantage against Khabib Nurmagomedov, but that's a huge if as to whether or not GSP could get down to 155, in my opinion. So, especially coming off fighting at 185 and the intestinal issues that he's had and things like that. So, something to keep our eye on for sure, but something that I don't know if it will if it will come to fruition. Another fight that I think is, ready and willing and able to happen if the right guy lets it happen, is Khabib versus Ben Askren. And Ben Askren is a name that not many MMA fans necessarily know about, but Ben Askren's a guy that one of the truly dominant fighters in mixed martial arts history, a guy that I think one of the best, I think the best fighter ever to not be in the UFC, even better than Fedor. Fedor fought some tomato cans. Not saying that Ben Askren's resume is unreal and fascinating and great, but it's better than Fedor's in my opinion. And he has dominated fighters, essentially not even getting punched in some fights to the tune of a decision or a TKO stoppage or corner stoppage. Ben Askren's legit, and I would like to see the UFC go out, get him, and make this happen, make this fight a reality. The next fight that I think is possible. I still think that there is hope for this fight, and that fight would be Khabib versus Tony. The reason why I think Khabib versus Tony would be a great fight is obvious. These are the two best lightweights in the world. Outside of Conor, these are the two guys that everyone has wanted to see fight. The fight has fallen apart 4 separate times. I still want to see it. I know there's a lot of fans out there that still want to see it, and they want to see it happen. I mean, just it's insane to me that it has taken this long for this fight to come to fruition. I remember when there were first rumblings about it, it was in 2013. So you got 5 years worth of pullouts between Khabib, 2 pullouts each between Khabib and Tony, respectively. You can't blame either fighter. They've both pulled out. You can't blame one of the fighters. They've both pulled out, and these things happen. So I think that those are options for the future. Rose Namajunas versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk took place last night as well in the co-main event, and man, did these ladies deliver. A 5-round war that I think will go down in history as one of the best female fights of all time. Rose Namajunas showed her toughness, her durability, and her ability to adjust, because Joanna Jędrzejczyk made a lot of adjustments in that fight. Her footwork was better. Her head movement was there. And I wrote some notes down about the fight. Namajunas still landed the left hook that dropped JJ in the first fight multiple times. Multiple times she landed that left hook, but it didn't quite land as flush and as clean as it did the first time. It was mainly because Joanna had her hand here practically the entire time. Her right hand, I should say. I mean, I'm facing, left or right, but it's the opposite. She had her hand like this, right against her jaw on the right side of her face. So to me, it would be this, but looks opposite, obviously, because I'm on camera. But I really liked how Joanna made the adjustments in the fight to help her win, but it still wasn't enough because Rose Namajunas is a very slick, very scrappy fighter, to be quite honest with you. And you wouldn't notice it by the looks of her because she's just so straight faced. She's just straight faced all the time. But when she's in there, she makes things happen. Rose's head movement, her footwork, her timing were impeccable, in my opinion, throughout this fight. She is the real deal, people. She's the best in the world outside of Cyborg. To me, I think her resume rivals Amanda Nunes tenfold due to the fact that she beat Joanna twice in a row. She knocked out Michelle Waterson. She had a true war with Tisha Torres. She's had a fantastic resume. She's destroyed Paige Van Zandt. So you really look at what she's done over the last few years. She's had a fantastic career in the UFC. It's only going to get better for her, I think. You really wonder who's next for her. I'll get to that in a little bit before after I talk about Joanna's performance. I think Rose could have knocked out Joanna. There were some exchanges where if she just threw one or two more punches, she might have been able to knock out Joanna because Joanna was a little bit clipped or dizzy. But that didn't happen. She didn't want to trade and get caught on the inside with Joanna. And I think that was smart. There was a smart game plan. Stick and move, really look to counter constantly. That's what she did. And she did a fantastic job. I thought she won the fight. There's some people out there saying that there's controversy. I don't see it personally. I thought Rose won easily, 3-2. It was close, but I thought Rose did win 3-2. One thing that Rose has to do better, you take positives from each fight, but you take negatives away too. One thing that Rose did or didn't do well that really shocked me, she didn't check any leg kicks at all. I mean, as the fight went on, her leg was just a complete mess, swollen from the thigh down. She was actually had welts all over her leg. Her calf was swollen. Just everything was swollen on her lead leg. I really thought that, the fight could potentially be stopped because of that. And I'm thankful that it wasn't, but something to keep an eye on. She has to throw more than one punch at a time. There were some combinations where Joanna would throw leg kick, body shot, and then a straight, and Rose would respond with just a left hook. She's got to follow things up a little bit better. I did think she won, but the punch output from Joanna was much higher, and they say numbers don't lie, but they do. Joanna threw more punches, but she didn't land as many hard, solid punches. She didn't really catch Rose at any point in the fight. So what is next for Rose? I think Jessica Andrade is next for Rose Namajunas, a former opponent of Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Joanna Jędrzejczyk ran right through her. She beat the tar out of her in the last time in the title fight that Andrade fought in. But styles make fights. Doesn't mean that just because Joanna beat Andrade pretty soundly does not mean that Rose will beat Andrade soundly. Styles make fights. We all know that. So my all in all, it was a hell of an event for an event that had so much turnover, for an event that had so many devastating issues. Realistically, I hope that Conor McGregor is suspended for up to a year. I think that that's fair. This card was destroyed due to his ridiculous hooligan actions leading up to the media day. And so many MMA fans, they say, well, Khabib went after his boy. He was just protecting his boy. Not like that. There's so many ways to go about it. Attacking a bus was just disgusting. It was despicable. And I really hope that the UFC draws a line in the sand, and I talked about that in one of my last videos on here. The Conor McGregor punishment should be that is the way I see it. It should be a year. Should be suspended the day it happened. He should be suspended. He should be suspended a year, a full calendar year up until that point. The UFC doesn't need him. There's other fights that can be made in his absence because they've been making those fights in his absence while he is quote unquote active. So all this talking about, oh, he's this, he's that. They have other stars that they can build. They were obviously trying to push Max Holloway into taking this fight. He accepted, and that fight almost happened with Khabib. That fight is still out there. Fans, ticket sales went up for UFC 223 when that fight was announced. So to say that they don't have any stars, I disagree. They don't have promotion behind any other stars the way they did with Conor McGregor. And I think that there's stars to make. You have Khabib as the lightweight champion now. You have Robert Whittaker, who I think is going to beat Yoel Romero again, if you want my early prediction on that. You have a fight between Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier that is a true champion versus champion fight, in my personal opinion. That will be one of the best ever, due to the fact that Cormier is undefeated at heavyweight. Stipe just ragged down Francis Ngannou, beat the living daylights out of him, and many fans did not expect that. So, to say the least, I think that this fight card went much, much better than what I thought it would. Some of the fighters, I can't even pronounce their names, and I hate to say that, but there were some really solid fights on this card. Fights that I think will be remembered, and fights that I think deserve more recognition. Fights that helped other fighters get more recognized in the sport for the better, while Conor McGregor continued to represent himself and the sport in the worst way possible. So I'm Ryan Thomas. In case you guys haven't heard, I'm the host of the Thomas Take Sports podcast, coming to you live on YouTube from now on. I'm very excited to bring a lot of content to this channel and keep things rolling on the Thomas Take Sports podcast. I've really enjoyed this, creating content, building it up, and promoting myself into this podcast host, commentator role that I have now. And I'm very, very excited for what the future holds. I love interacting with people, haters or believers that, comment on these videos. So feel free to comment on the videos. I know I'm obviously doing this from my bedroom, which, you can tell I'm in my bedroom. But this is just casual to me. It's a podcast. It's fun, keeps things light, keeps things interesting, and creates new debate for sports fans around the country. So I'm Ryan Thomas of the Thomas Take Sports podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Thomas Takeover. You can also like the Facebook page at Thomas Takeover. You can find it on the search bar as well on the Thomas Take Sports podcast Facebook search bar. Just search on Facebook. You'll find it, the Thomas Take Sports podcast. It'll pop up. Click like, make it happen. And obviously, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're on YouTube right now. Why not subscribe to the YouTube channel? It is free, FREE, to subscribe. You just click it, and you'll always have access to my show whenever, however you want, whether it's on your smartphone, whether it's on your laptop, whether it's on Spreaker.com. Spreaker.com, follow me on there. Obviously, the Thomas Take Sports podcast. So much stuff to cover. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to be talking about the Buffalo Bills and their draft strategy heading into the 2018 NFL Draft. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love each and every one of you, guys, girls, people that just started following me, and people that have been following me for a long time. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Teespring.com, the Thomas Take Sports podcast. You will find this T-shirt. Take care.